Okay, the purpose of these presentations is to give you a very short synopsis of the reading. It's not intended to replace the reading, just to kind of highlight the key elements of the readings. And this particular presentation is covering 3 of the short chapters from the ebook: Information Processing, Piaget, and Behaviorism. All right, let's start with information processing. There's actually a huge amount of information that we have about this theory. There have been thousands and thousands of studies. Lots of research has revolved around it. But the bottom line is that there are some particularly cogent ideas from this theory that are relevant to teaching and learning. And so among the different aspects is the idea of 7 plus or minus 2 pieces of information. So if you look at the drawing that I have here, the depiction of the information processing model, the blue area is called short-term memory, and in short-term memory you can hold 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information at any given time. And if you have too much information, you lose stuff out of short-term memory. And that's really where they also call it working memory. This is where all the consciousness exists. Okay. Long-term memory is what the goal of education is. What we want is we want our students to learn stuff. And what does it mean to learn stuff? It means that they hold that stuff in long-term memory. And in categorizing the kinds of things that are in long-term memory, you basically have declarative pieces of information, which are generally factual in nature. You have procedural information, which is more knowing how. You have episodic memory, which is the individual stories of life experiences that each individual has. You have imagery information, so you have things, images in your mind, and that's broadly defined so that it's multisensory. So you have smells that are also imagery-like in nature. And then you have strategic knowledge, so general strategies that you have to operate within the world. Okay, and those are all the things that are called long-term memory. I suggest, and I'm not sure that this is completely agreed upon, that what most people call conceptual knowledge is really a collective of all those things. So all the declarative, procedural, episodic imagery and strategic knowledge that you have around a specific topic would be, that collection of information would be your concept of that idea. So if the concept is bird, for example, then there's declarative information about bird, there's procedural information about bird, there's episodic information about bird, there's images that you have of birds, and there might be some strategic information about birds. And so that all of that together would be your concept of bird. And then the other thing that's probably really important for teaching and learning is the primary way of getting stuff into long-term memory is elaboration. And so elaboration is all about trying to make meaning, trying to make lots of connections in long-term memory to the existing things that we know. So it isn't really done through repetition. Repetition is something that allows you to maintain things in short-term memory, but it doesn't really help you get it into long-term memory. It's really elaboration is what we need to do as teachers to have our students engage in some kind of an elaboration activity in order to get things learned. Okay. Information processing applied. Here are some general rules of thumb. If you think about information processing and what does it mean for teaching and learning: 1, use images. 2, related to elaboration, tie new information to old information. Identify the type of learning. So is it procedural, is it declarative, and match a teaching strategy to each type of memory. Use events for episodic learning. You can go on field trips or do other kinds of classroom events that give kids these story repertoires that help them with elaboration and and memory concepts of ideas that you want them to learn. And focus on strategies. The best way to learn strategies is to teach strategies. If you're learning math, use some specific strategies to math, like drawing a picture. If you're teaching reading, give them specific strategies, like retelling what they've just read, or make predictions about what they think is going to happen in what they're reading. So give them some specific strategies for whatever the domain happens to be. And those are some of the key ideas from information processing as it's applied in teaching and learning. Piaget is probably best known for his stages theories, and I'm not going to really talk about the stages. It was in the ebook, but for me, probably the most important thing that he talks about is assimilation, accommodation, and equilibration, because those collectively would be what we would call constructivism. That gives you the learning mechanisms that would go along with the ideas that we talk about in constructivism. And again, with constructivism, it's all about active learning to really allow learners to engage in something more deeply. So let's talk about that. Telling isn't going to get people in the basic process of going from equilibration. What happens is an organism, a human organism, wants to be in a state of equilibration. And what happens is that as you go through life and you have experiences, your mind gets into a state of disequilibration, and you have two primary mechanisms for getting yourself back into a state of equilibration. You have assimilation and you have accommodation. Assimilation is you take whatever you're experiencing and manipulate that experience to make it fit with your existing structures. And in accommodation, what happens is you say, you know what, this is something totally new. I need to come up with a new scheme for understanding this experience. And so you create a whole new schema for understanding that phenomena, and that's what accommodation is. So accommodation, you change your internal structures, and assimilation, you change the stimulus to make it fit with your internal structures. Okay? So telling isn't going to get people in a state of disequilibration. So delivering a lecture isn't going to cause that state of disequilibration. Experience, active learning will. Learning by constructing something will. So again, Piaget has been popular for a long time now, and his stage theories are quite popular when you're talking about elementary schools, but his learning theory doesn't get talked about as much, but it actually fits quite nicely with the idea of constructionism, which is a very popular notion in today in educational literature. And behaviorism. Behaviorism is the third short we're going to talk about. And behaviorism, although a lot of people think that that's gone, there was a big debate between Noam Chomsky and B.F. Skinner in the 60s, and trying to explain how people's language ability develops. And largely people suggest that Noam Chomsky won that debate, and that was the emergence of cognitive psychology and the information processing model, and a re-emergence of the Piagetian perspectives within the U.S. Educational psychology area. But behaviorism doesn't go away. A lot of the, if you ask B.F. Skinner about the theories of behaviorism, he'd say it's not really a theory, it's a technique. That behaviorist theories are really behaviorist techniques. And so we use behaviorist techniques all the time in teaching things, like modeling, showing correct behavior, shaping, reinforcing successive approximations of a correct behavior. Most computer-based tutorials are basically shaping. You give them a little bit of information, you ask them a question to see if they're with you, they understand that, you give a little bit more information. It's kind of a shaping process that happens. Cueing, providing some sort of verbal prompt. Now, what do we do before we answer the question? Oh, we raise our hand. So you just use the cue. You don't have to say raise your hand. What do we do before we answer the question? The kids know that they're supposed to raise their hand, so use that cueing prompt. Okay. Classroom management. But there are two particular constructs that are used all the time in classrooms, particularly K-12 classrooms, and those are reinforcement and punishment. And reinforcement, from a behavioral perspective, simply means anything that increases the behavior of interest. So there are two ideas there. One is the behavior of interest. What is it that you're interested in? And often what you have is the behavior of interest might be calling out in class or misbehaving in class, getting out of their chair or something like that. So you have to identify the behavior of interest, and then the question is, do you want to increase that behavior or decrease that behavior? Anything that increases the behavior is a reinforcement. Anything that decreases that behavior is a punishment. Okay? So usually what we want is desirable behaviors of interest you want to reinforce, and undesirable behaviors of interest are things that you want to punish. In general, the general rule is that reinforcement is the more powerful strategy. So the best way of eliminating behaviors that are not positive is to reinforce behaviors that aren't positive. Okay? The other thing that we use all the time in classroom management is contracts, an agreement as to when reinforcement will occur related to the behavior of interest. Extinction is removal of reinforcing behavior. So if you have a class clown and all the children laugh, you punish the other children for laughing. And if you remove that reinforcing element of the classroom, then you can extinguish that behavior. Still used extensively in special education and as a classroom management strategy in other classrooms. It doesn't go away because it works. All right, so let me just summarize these chapters. As I said, this is just a short summary of what you've read. Piaget is a big part of other parts of the ebook that this lecture goes along with. So constructivism is one of the chapters we'll read about. Conceptual change is another one that we'll read about. And Piaget is sort of central to both of those particular theories. Behaviorism is actually tied in quite nicely with cognitive apprenticeships, where they talk about modeling, where modeling, shaping, and cueing can be applied to the elements of cognitive apprenticeships. And information processing really it has elements to every single instructional chapter that we'll look at. So these are pretty foundational theories: Piaget, information processing, and behaviorism to all of education. And I hope you have a good evening, and bye-bye.